Well, today is World Elephant Day and aims to raise awareness about the preservation and protection of elephants. In China, a group of 14 elephants have been wandering in Yunnan province since April last year, and they have now returned to their habitat after a 1,300-kilometer trek. For more, let's go live to our reporter Dai Kai-yi in Chengdu. Kai-yi, hello there. Well, first of all, tell us about them, about those wandering elephants. What have they been up to?
Right, so the herd, as you mentioned, has now 14 elephants in total. They're of different sizes and ages, and there are originally 16 of them, but then 2 drifted off from the group a while back. So they've traveled more than 800 miles so far, or 1,300 kilometers, on a journey lasting more than 110 days. So the herd has made the northward trek beginning April 16th this year. And when they left the city of Pu'er in Yunnan province, which administers a nature reserve, which they used to inhabit. And all the way north, they passed through the cities of Pu'er, Honghe, and Yuxi. And then in early June, they eventually reached the outskirts of Kunming, the provincial capital. And wildlife protection officials say the elephants heading home now have safely crossed a bridge over Yuanjiang River, and they're headed towards the nature reserve they left for the journey. And over 150,000 people have been evacuated in Yunnan due to the elephants' journey. And local authorities have monitored the animals and worked hard to keep them away from residential areas, tracking them on ground and by drones 24 hours a day. And there are over 25,000 police officers and staff that have been dispatched up till now, and a large number of vehicles and drones have been deployed as well to not only monitor but also guide the migrating elephants. And some 180 tons of food have also been provided to the elephants on their migration. So officials say all the animals are in a stable condition, and neither elephants nor people have been injured along the way. Back to Dongning.
Right, and from the monitoring, actually, there are a lot of footage that have been giving people a lot of joy indeed, and satisfy the curiosity about this herd of elephants on the way. The elephant babies, their mud baths, etc., etc. Tell us more about the highlights of their journey and why is this herd of elephants getting so much attention?
Yes, I would say that one thing that catches my attention the most is how did they cross the river? Because crossing the river is regarded as, by many experts, as one of the biggest obstacles for the elephants to migrate back south, because they entered in the middle of April, and back then the region was in dry season. But starting from July, the rainy season kicked in, and the flow of water just rose sharply, and many view this as a major hurdle to the elephants to return south. And to help the herd cross the river, staff have studied conditions at the 76-kilometer waterway, and they've chosen eventually a bridge along an old highway. And authorities have deployed electric fences and bait and laid artificial roads for those elephants to make sure that they take the correct route. And dozens of heavy trucks have also been arranged in advance along the riverside to prevent elephants from, approaching the river. And their trek, as you mentioned, has caught global attention, triggering heated debate over the root causes, as many are curious about why they left their protected habitat. And some experts say migrating to forage for food comes naturally to the elephants, and they say conservation efforts have allowed the number of elephants in the wild to grow, and this has made it inevitable for the elephants to demand more food and space. And others say human development has encroached on their natural habitat, turning their land to they rely on into islands, and this means traditional buffer zones between humans and elephants are gradually disappearing. So to better coordinate ecological protection across different regions, local authorities have been saying that they're speeding up the building of a national park for Asian elephants, which they say hopefully will serve the purpose of studying and protecting the species. Back to Dongning.
Right, all right. Thank you very much, Dai Kai, reporting from Chengdu in Sichuan province. And to discuss this further, we're now joined by Professor Li Binbin from the Environmental Research Center at Duke Kunshan University. Professor Li, welcome to Global Watch. Well, first of all, we've been enjoying together with the elephant on the way, indeed, seeing the baby elephants and being touched by the elephants' mums, and also actually the whole group is trying to protect the elephant and save the elephant in the baby elephant in danger, etc., etc. But while the elephant was still strolling and eating along the way, is this elephant migration a rare phenomenon or common one?
So migration actually is pretty common, like for a lot of species, and actually elephants is one species of them. And actually, because the size of the elephants and their natural history, elephants actually are really good at migration. And then the longest distance in the world could be more than thousand kilometers. So actually, it is not rare for elephants actually to go from Xishuangbanna all the way and to Kunming or from Port to Kunming. So actually, this is a not rare phenomenon, but the problem is previously the number of elephants actually in China was pretty low. So with the increasing number of elephants mentioned by a lot of experts and also the reporters, the numbers are increasing, but then their habitats actually are shrinking. Although we have established a lot of protected areas and trying to protect their habitat, but still compared to their historical range, it is still small. So then with the increasing number of elephants because of our protection, they are actually coming out of the areas and finding new habitats.
Right, and as we've seen, local authorities have been closely monitoring the elephants, giving them food along the way. But at the meantime, the elephants also sabotaged some of the local farmers' crop fields, etc., etc. Do you think the balance between protecting animals like the elephants and protecting people's, especially economic interests, are well protected?
I think this is a good question because we probably have more and more cases like this in the future. One thing is China actually put a lot of efforts in wildlife and biodiversity conservation. So with the efforts, we can see the increase of wildlife, different species, their expansion of their habitats because of the restoration of different ecosystems. And also, humans actually were expanding our range as well. So there are certain areas that will be the hotspots for this kind of wildlife-human conflicts. And previously, these conflicts are just in some local area. For example, it happens a lot in Xishuangbanna. But now, because the elephants are coming out of this small county and all the way to another city, so then it becomes a spotlight issue. And how can we do the balance between conservation and human development? I think for this time, China actually put a lot of efforts trying to avoid the direct conflicts because elephants, when they meet people, when they get scared, they will hurt or even kill people. And we do not want that direct conflict happen because that will increase the hatred and towards wildlife species, but it's not their fault. It's because we're expanding our activity areas. So a lot of resources have been put into this effort. They are giving a lot of food, and also there are more than $1 billion lost because of the crop raiding from the elephants in this journey. But the government pay for it all for the farmers. But the real question is, in the long term, how can we establish certain mechanism trying to mitigate the conflicts and are trying to compensate for the loss, especially for the local community. I think China right now are piloting in a lot of areas trying to solve the wildlife-human conflicts, but still there's a long journey to go.
Right, a sustainable systemic policies or measures to be in place in the near future? All right, we'll be getting back to you, Professor, a moment later. Now, Thailand has developed a tourism industry, as we all know, depend on elephants, but the pandemic is keeping many tourists away, and many elephants have been put into sanctuaries. Our correspondent Martin Low is joining us from a sanctuary in the resort city of Pattaya in the country. Martin, I can see two. Are there two elephants behind you? Tell us about the situation of the elephants there.
There's 3 elephants,
Three.
but a large one, as you can imagine, has gone out of shot. You know what it's like working with live animals. Well, these animals here, these elephants cooling off in their waterhole, seem to be happy enough. But in fact, the pandemic has been catastrophic for elephants here in Thailand. Of course, they're big beasts and they need to eat a lot of food. It costs the equivalent of $80 to feed an elephant just for one day. And of course, with almost 18 months now of the pandemic, with no visitors, no tourists coming to the camps and the sanctuaries, nobody paying admission fees, nobody making any donations, there is simply no money to pay for the upkeep and the medicine that these animals need. And as a result, dozens and dozens of sanctuaries and camps all across Thailand, from Chiang Mai in the north and to the islands of the south, have closed down, and they've turned the animals out. That's led to the largest elephant migration here in Thailand in living memory. Thailand has the second biggest captive elephant herd in Asia, and many of them, hundreds of them, have trudged hundreds of kilometers back to their traditional breeding grounds in the northeast of Thailand, around the province of Surin. Even this sanctuary, this is the elephant sanctuary at Pattaya, relatively small in number, but half of the elephants who would normally be here have been taken away and taken back to Surin. Now, even when they get back to their homelands, to their traditional breeding grounds, the problems aren't over. In the past, elephants could earn their keep. They were basically big tractors and they used to move things around. They used to carry tree trunks. But this practice, which is known as elephant logging, was banned in 1989. So they're basically unemployable. So they can't earn any money to buy food. Also in the past, they were free to roam and eat at will through the jungles. But most of the jungles have now been cut down to make way for modern agricultural practices. And so even though they're back in their homelands where you think that they would be free to roam, a lot of the time now they have to be chained up, because otherwise they would simply run amok through farmers' fields and plunder their crops. Now, there is some help, some minimal help from charities, and of course there's some money from government, but it's never enough. And basically there are a lot of elephants in Thailand who are going quite hungry at the moment.
Indeed. Well, it's sad to hear about that, but at least the 3 elephants behind you are having a good time there in the pond. All right, thank you very much, Martin Low, reporting from Pattaya in Thailand. Now, the UN says poaching has reduced the number of elephants in Africa, and their population has fallen from an estimated 12 million a century ago to less than 500,000. Countries across the world are taking measures to protect the elephants. CGTN's Wang Jiao Mongai reports from on the conservation efforts in Kenya.
Jackson Onchweri is celebrating his bounty sorghum harvest. He is a farmer near the Kenya-Tanzania border. Over the years, he has had problems with the animals that have been fond of his crops. He recalls that elephants have been the most notorious.
Before I had to harvest, immediately the crops were ready, as early as possible, so that if elephants happen to come, they don't destroy the ready crops.
But with the intervention of a nearby facility, the Enonkishu Conservancy, incidents have reduced. These fences have gone a long way in preventing elephants' raid in the nearby communities. The Conservancy has put various measures in place to resolve the animal-human conflict here. They have been funding households to fence their homesteads and positioning beehives in strategic places to keep elephants at bay. Albert Ngetich is one of the guards that patrol the Conservancy. He also keeps an eye on poachers who are blamed for the dwindling number of elephants, not just here but throughout the country.
The elephant raiding normally happens late in the evening or early in the morning. Elephants are very wise. They actually push this pole down and they make their way to the farms. and they invade the crops around here. Whenever they had a raiding overnight, they call us, and the patrol team will respond, and the elephants will be driven away from the farms.
Initially, communities would confront the animals by throwing objects at them, which would result to injuries and at times deaths. The animal-human conflict in the area triggered action from the facility.
In 2013, we lost 14 elephants in our conservancy. So what we did is we got all the landowners together and we said that enough is enough. We need to protect these elephants. It's a constant battle trying to keep the elephants out of the crops. We've been fencing, we've been expanding our area so the elephants don't run out of food in their natural habitat.
As the world celebrates the Elephant Day, the Enon Kishu Conservancy is boasting of protecting the Big Five member from harm, as well as peaceful coexistence with humans. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
All right, now let's get back to our guest, Professor Lee Bingbing. Professor Lee, so after seeing the elephant protection in Thailand and in Africa, how would you assess the global conservation efforts for the giant animal?
Yeah, they actually serve as the charismatic species, and people usually use them as the flagship species, which means protecting them can actually attract a lot of attention from the public to support the protection of their habitats, which can also support the other species that are not well known to the public or they are not that cute. And for this species, a lot of efforts have put into conserving them. For example, the most important mean actually is to establish protected areas because they have legal status and can protect the species and their habitat against, for example, the change of land cover use, changing from forest to cropland or doing mining within the protected areas, which can guarantee the safety of their habitat and the extent of their range. Nonetheless, because of the COVID, as we know, happened from 2020, and actually a lot of countries and have some hard time supporting biodiversity conservation and especially protected areas. So there could be some layoff of the staff. And actually for these big animals, and especially like elephants, they are one of the main targets for poaching because of the ivory. So the layoff of rangers may actually affect the anti-poaching efforts, and that will be one problem in nowadays. So how to support these people, support the protected areas, and have the finance and also funding available for the actual conservation work is really important. But they actually have already got a lot of attention from the public. So hopefully the public can understand the connection between biodiversity and human ourselves and put more efforts in conserving them.
So everything has largely come back to the question of the balance between human and nature. And thank you very much indeed, Professor Lee Bingbing, Assistant Professor of Environmental Research Center at the Duke Kunshan University.